The object was hidden where no one dared to touch it, deep inside Caligula's private chambers, locked behind a door that opened only for the emperor himself. A chest that looked ordinary, darkened wood, simple iron fittings, but whose contents made even Rome's most seasoned officers step back. Inside it, according to Suetonius, were dozens of small vials filled with substances so lethal that, after Caligula's death, his successor Claudius ordered them thrown into the sea, and dead fish washed ashore for miles. This chest was not symbolic. It was a collection of poisons used to eliminate rivals, enemies, and even potential heirs, and it sat there at the heart of the imperial residence, surrounded by personal documents, execution lists, and notes detailing orders given during fits of paranoia. The fact is simple and terrifying. What investigators found inside Caligula's chambers proved that the terror was not literary exaggeration. It was a functioning system. And today, we will follow the trail left by that chest to understand how far absolute power drove Caligula, and why this discovery still haunts Rome. Before he became the name Rome tried to erase, Caligula was just Gaius, a boy who grew up marching alongside the legions of his father, Germanicus. The soldiers called him Caligula, Little Boot, because he wore a miniature version of military armor. For men surrounded by brutality, that smiling child was almost a good luck charm. He came from a powerful bloodline, but one deeply marked by suspicious deaths. His father, adored by the troops, died young, possibly poisoned. His mother was exiled and starved to death. 2 of his brothers were imprisoned and slowly eliminated. Gaius's childhood wasn't made of games, it was made of funerals. Even so, when he took the throne in 37 AD at just 24 years old, Rome believed it was witnessing a new beginning. And with good reason. In the first months, Caligula seemed like the perfect ruler. He freed political prisoners, brought exiles back, published the imperial budget for the first time, and offered grand public games to the people. Accounts say crowds wept with joy when they saw him. Rome, exhausted by Tiberius's paranoia, saw in Caligula a savior. Then came the turning point. 8 months after taking power, Caligula fell gravely ill. Ancient sources don't agree on the cause: epilepsy, encephalitis, brain fever, perhaps even poisoning. But they all agree on one thing. The man who got out of that bed was not the same man who had been laid in it. Suetonius says his voice changed. Servants report that he started looking at people as if he could see through them. He began to claim he spoke with Jupiter, that he was a living god, that he had visions no one else could see. From that moment on, the line between government and delusion disappeared. This is where our investigation begins. Today we're going back to the writings of the Roman authors themselves, Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius Dio, to reconstruct, step by step, what was really happening inside Caligula's private chambers, and why so many of those details were hidden, rewritten, or destroyed after his death. What you're about to see is not myth. It's what survived, despite Rome's efforts to erase everything. Act 1. The stage of nightmare. The place where everything happens is not a hidden dungeon. It doesn't need to be. The Palatine Palace, the official residence of the emperors, was in itself a space that shaped behavior. Imagine a massive complex of long corridors interconnected rooms, inner gardens, private temples, and restricted chambers, built over decades by different rulers. Everything there had a political purpose. Nothing was random. The walls were lined with imported marble, columns rose in symmetrical rows, and entire floors were covered with mosaics so detailed they looked like paintings. Light filtered in, reflecting off bright surfaces. It was a place built to impress and to intimidate. Caligula had lived there since his adolescence. He knew every restricted access, every discreet staircase, every room where decisions were made far from the public eye. And as his behavior changed after his illness, this immense palace began to function as an extension of his mind, unpredictable, silent, and charged with constant tension. The accounts of Suetonius and Cassius Dio describe the political atmosphere inside the residence. Servants speaking softly to avoid drawing attention. Guards waiting for orders without knowing whether they would be sent on an official mission or to carry out an execution. Senators walking tensely, trying to read the emperor's mood before approaching him. This climate was not the result of later imagination. It came from a very real political structure. Access to the emperor was power, and the emperor could decide life or death with a gesture. To understand what would happen next, it's essential to understand how this imperial ecosystem worked. There were private chambers where only a few people were allowed. There were audience halls where Caligula received petitions. There were inner councils where decrees were signed. And there were administrative rooms where official documents and execution lists were stored. All of this existed. All of this is documented. None of this is fiction. The emperor walked those corridors daily, accompanied by Germanic guards, his elite troop, men who towered over the average Roman. Many did not speak Latin. They obeyed only gestures or short words translated by officers. For any nervous senator, trying to argue or beg would be useless. Those soldiers were not there to negotiate, but to block unwanted approaches. Their presence created a physical and psychological barrier, tall, silent, and impenetrable, that isolated Caligula from everyone around him. Beside them walked the scribes, recording orders immediately. And those orders, written on wax tablets and official documents, were carried out with the usual speed of the Roman system. As his paranoia grew, the records show that the Palatine became a stage of permanent anxiety. It wasn't screams, torture devices, or secret rooms that shaped the fear. It was the constant awareness that the emperor's mood defined everything. Tacitus says that during this phase, no senator entered his chambers without fearing for his life. Suetonius confirms that conversations were measured word by word. Cassius Dio notes that even relatives lived as if they were strangers. The grand architecture amplified all of this. The acoustics of the corridors made footsteps sound too loud. The marble reflected cold. The size of the halls made anyone feel small before the imperial throne. And at the center of this monumental environment stood Caligula, now convinced he was more than a ruler. He called himself divine, chosen by the gods, and justified every decision with this supposed celestial legitimacy. It is within this space, a palace magnificent on the outside and suffocating on the inside, that the most controversial events of his life would unfold. Before we examine his concrete actions, we need to understand this atmosphere. A place where architectural beauty coexisted with political fear. where silence was worth more than words, and where a single man held the power to reshape the state or destroy it. It is on this stage, real and documented, that the evidence begins to take shape. Act 2. The evidence. Insomnia. The emperor who could not stop. Ancient biographers recorded that Caligula barely slept. Suetonius mentions that his nights were broken, restless, often no more than 2 or 3 hours long. This transformed the Palatine into an environment of permanent vigilance. In the middle of the night, he wandered through the palace like a shadow, waking servants for no reason, asking for extra torches, summoning people who had no idea why they were being called. This pattern, repeated night after night, created a place where no one could truly rest. The sound of footsteps could mean anything, from a passing whim to a death sentence. Divine delusion. Conversations with the moon and Jupiter. According to Cassius Dio, Caligula believed he received direct instructions from the gods. He didn't present these statements as political rhetoric. To him, they were facts. There are accounts of nights when he stood on the balcony in silence, staring at the moon as if responding to someone. He gestured toward the sky, murmured incomprehensible phrases, and later claimed he had received warnings. To justify sudden decisions, he said Jupiter had spoken to him. To validate punishments, he cited signs invisible to mortals. The administration of the empire, which should have followed logic, began to follow his personal interpretations of visions. The banquets, public humiliation, degradation, and broken taboos. For any Roman, banquets were among the most formal and political moments of social life. But under Caligula, they became the center of institutionalized humiliation. Suetonius describes that even before the meal began, Caligula would walk among the tables and lift the chins of the guests' wives, examining them like a merchant evaluating goods at a slave market. He observed the shape of the face, the body, the posture, all in front of their husbands. And on many occasions he chose one of them. After making his selection, he simply stood up, called the woman, and led her to an adjacent room. The guests remained motionless, unable to react. After a while, Caligula returned to the dining hall and, according to Suetonius, publicly commented on the woman's performance, describing intimate details in front of everyone, especially the husband, who was required to smile and agree to avoid being accused of disrespecting the emperor. He praised, criticized, compared. He turned someone else's intimacy into spectacle, and the husbands into powerless spectators. But there was something even more disturbing. The most hostile sources, Suetonius and some later traditions, report that Caligula brought his 3 sisters to the banquets, and that, in front of the Senate, he treated Drusilla as if she were his legitimate wife. On several occasions, he placed Agrippina and Julia Livilla at his sides in provocative ways, and some accounts claim he displayed behaviors typical of a couple with them during the meals. The entire room remained in absolute silence. No one dared look away, nor stare directly. It was the public normalization of a taboo. The message was clear. The laws of Rome did not apply to the man who claimed to be a living god. And if he could take his own sisters before the elite, what would stop him from taking wives, daughters, property, or the lives of any guest? These banquets were not just debauchery. They were demonstrations of absolute power designed to break the dignity of those present and prove that no one, absolutely no one, had value before him. The humiliation of Cassius Chaerea. The spark among those who witnessed all of this was Cassius Chaerea, a veteran officer of the Praetorian Guard. A respected soldier known for his discipline, Chaerea quickly became a preferred target of the emperor's provocations. Caligula mocked his voice, imitated his tone in caricature, and, according to Suetonius, forced him to repeat obscene passwords, chosen specifically to destroy his authority in front of his subordinates. For a military man, raised in honor and tradition, this was not just an insult. It was the stripping of his identity. And while the banquets shattered the dignity of the civil elite, the humiliations directed at Chaerea shattered the dignity of the military. From that moment on, Chaerea stopped being just a guard. He became a man who knew that if he didn't act, he would be destroyed. If the evidence so far has gripped you, leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join the investigation. We are now descending into the case's darkest layers. Act 3. The reconstruction of the truth. Now we enter a territory where every step can be reconstructed with almost surgical precision, because Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and even Josephus describe the details of this moment with unsettling clarity. We are no longer dealing with rumors. We are facing facts anchored in documents, testimonies, and accounts that survived across centuries. This is the moment when Rome decides to kill its own god. January 41st AD, the Palatine at Boiling Point, Rome, was saturated. The arbitrary executions, the absurd taxes, the scandalous banquets, and the military humiliation had eroded everyone's patience. The Senate feared extermination. The Praetorian Guard feared the emperor might burn the city on a whim. Even the people, once enthusiastic, whispered in alleyways about omens, comets, and divine displeasure. And Caligula, increasingly isolated, saw signs in everything. Strange dreams, premonitions, shadows. Insomnia consumed him. Irritation became constant. According to Suetonius, he spoke of leaving Rome and moving to Alexandria to be worshipped as a true god, not merely as an emperor. This idea, explicitly recorded, was the breaking point. Rome could survive a tyrant. Rome could not survive its emperor fleeing to Egypt with the imperial treasury. And at that moment, fear transformed into desperation. The conspiracy had no ideology. There was no defense of the Republic, no political project. It was survival. Cassius Chaerea, the Praetorian, humiliated daily. Cornelius Sabinus, another officer who had witnessed military abuses. Ministers and freedmen, enraged by unpredictable punishments. Senators, fearing an imminent massacre. But Chaerea was the blade, the steady hand, the military figure capable of commanding men in a tight space at the exact moment. And here the narrative tightens. Their goal wasn't just to kill the emperor. They needed to eliminate him before the Germanic guards intervened. Those guards, enormous, loyal, brutal, were the last barrier between Caligula and the rest of the world. So the group studied every movement, every vulnerable window, every path the emperor took without the giants of the Rhine at his side. The last day, January 24th, 41 AD. The sources agree Caligula woke up irritated, complained about the actors, complained about the gladiators, complained about the food, complained about bad omens. He attended the Palatine Games, where theatrical performances were being presented. During the shows, he laughed loudly, mocked the performers, interrupted their lines. Chaerea was there, standing, listening, waiting. Cassius Dio mentions that during the performances, Caligula watched a play involving murder and betrayal. He found it amusing. This detail matters. Ancient writers loved irony, and this one was preserved by tradition. When the spectacle ended, Caligula stood to go eat lunch. And here came the fatal mistake. He dismissed part of his Germanic guards. It was common for him to do this when he wanted to walk faster or move between rooms without the crowd of bodyguards. But on that specific day, that gesture opened the flank of death. The corridor chosen for execution. The Palatine contains multiple levels, passages, and restricted access points. The conspirators knew exactly which underground corridor the emperor would use to shortcut to the chambers where he would dine. It was narrow, low-lit, difficult for multiple soldiers to move together. The ideal trap. Chaerea positioned himself at the entrance. Other praetorians spread along the sides. Sympathetic servants held doors. Men lined up pretending to await orders. The corridor was full, but everyone there was against the emperor. Caligula enters. He sees Chaerea. For the first time, the soldier does not lower his gaze. This moment is described by Suetonius with intensity. The two of them face to face, only steps apart, in a corridor where no Germanic giant could comfortably fit. Caligula opens his mouth to mock him again, but he never gets the chance. Chaerea strikes first. He advances, not as a soldier, but as someone executing both personal and collective justice. The first blow hits the emperor's jaw and neck, exactly as Suetonius records. Caligula stumbles backward, stunned, unable to understand that this is not a joke. He tries to speak, tries to turn his body, but other conspirators leap onto him. The scene devolves into chaos. Caligula falls, tries to rise, tries to scream, but the corridor becomes a funnel of violence. And here comes the sonic callback, completing the circle with the beginning of the documentary. Remember the palace acoustics we described? Stone walls, low ceilings, narrow passage? When the attack began, the sound exploded. Metal against bone, short screams, bodies crashing into the walls, sandals scraping against marble floors. Everything amplified, everything echoing as if the Palatine itself were watching. But there was one sound that didn't happen. No call for help, no scream loud enough to cross the complex. The Germanic guards, those giants always a few steps away, were too far, and the corridor muffled everything else. The same architecture Caligula used to intimidate senators by amplifying his footsteps now smothered his own cries. The man who terrorized an entire court died inside the very silence he had turned into a psychological weapon. Panic on the Palatine. As soon as the body fell, panic erupted. Doors slammed shut. Servants fled. The conspirators tried to delay the Germanic guards' discovery. Then came the second wave of violence, one even ancient historians recorded with discomfort. The brutality did not stop with the emperor. The conspirators believed Caligula's bloodline needed to be extinguished to prevent future revenge. His wife, Caesonia, did not try to escape. Suetonius writes that upon seeing the assassins, she offered her neck and said she had expected it. But the most painful detail, the one that proved this was no longer politics but pure hatred, was the fate of his daughter, Julia Drusilla, still a child. She was killed against a wall with such ferocity that it shocked even Roman historians, men accustomed to describing executions, massacres, and war. The emperor's death was politics. The wife's and child's deaths were vengeance. That day, the Palatine, once the center of power, became nothing more than the backdrop of a slaughter. The city in suspension. Who rules now? Rome fell into shock. The Senate tried to restore the Republic. The Praetorians pursued their own interests. The people were torn between relief and terror. And then, in a nearly cinematic moment, some soldiers found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, hiding behind a curtain. Terrified, trembling, they pulled him out, unsure whether to kill him. Instead, they proclaimed him emperor. He accepted, and chaos suddenly had a center. The body of Caligula, the final fate. The details are fragmented, but the sources agree. His body was left on the floor for hours, later taken away in haste. No public ritual was allowed. The burial was rushed and hidden. The man who demanded worship as a god was placed in a quick, unceremonious grave. And the damnatio memoriae, the official destruction of his memory, began that same week. The legacy of the assassination. A wound. Rome never closed. The Palatine, after the murder, was marked. Servants swore they heard footsteps. Guards reported echoes. Senators avoided certain corridors, not because they believed in the emperor's ghost, but because, even dead, Caligula still represented the worst Rome could become. Cassius Dio says, "Rome killed the monster, but not the disease that created him." And that's exactly the sensation. The man's death did not end the trauma. When Caligula's body was removed from that corridor, the palace did not breathe relief. On the contrary, the silence that settled after the massacre was unlike any other silence the Palatine had ever known. It was heavy, dense, almost tangible. Records show that in the days that followed, Rome entered a state of suspension. No one knew what to say, what to think, or how to explain the fact that the man who proclaimed himself a god had been killed with the ease of an ordinary mortal. The walls had witnessed everything: the delusion, the abuse, the absolute power, and the fall. And what remained? A traumatized empire. The Senate tried to erase his memory. Inscriptions bearing his name were destroyed. Statues lost their faces. Documents were rewritten. The Roman technique of damnatio memoriae reached its peak. They believed that erasing Caligula's name was the way to bury the horror. But the effect was exactly the opposite. The more Rome tried to forget, the more obvious it became that something terrible had happened there. The historians Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Tacitus were not merely recording the life of an emperor. They were describing the worst possible scenario when absolute power meets emotional instability, isolation, and paranoia. And that explains why, 2,000 years later, his name still provokes a specific kind of discomfort. It's not just the cruelty, it's not just the madness. It's the understanding that the line between civilization and chaos is thinner than we like to admit. The Palatine, which should have been the administrative heart of the empire, became a laboratory of abuse. The Germanic guards, who were meant to protect the emperor, became silent walls between him and the rest of humanity. The corridors amplified fear, and, in the end, muffled the tyrant's own cries for help. Modern investigators, archaeologists, and historians, in reconstructing these routines, realized something unsettling. Caligula did not destroy Rome, but he showed Rome how it could be destroyed. That is the true legacy. Not the incest, not the banquets, not the divine delusions. but the reminder that the most powerful political structure of antiquity fell hostage to a single man and nearly collapsed because of him. And that is why, even today, every reconstructed corridor, every uncovered object, every erased inscription still seems to whisper the same question. How did an entire empire become trapped inside the mind of one man? If this investigation opened a door you can't close, leave a like. Subscribe and ring the bell to be alerted when the next file is unsealed. The archives are deep, and we are just getting started.